Hi, I'm Chris and welcome to part 2 of my Ender 5 video series that I'm adding linear rails to the Ender 5 printer. If you missed part 1, now would be a great time to go watch so that you're caught up on where I am today, and then come back to this video. For a recap, in part 1 I was able to take apart the motion system of the Ender 5 and I started to get everything installed, but I found out that my adapters that I had made had a few mechanical problems. So I redesigned those adapters, and that's where this part in the video series picks up. So without further ado, this is Kersey Fabrications. All right, after that short break, I've got new components and now we can get back to building. So these new components have the cutouts for the screws that are in the bottom of these plates. They're no longer symmetrical. You notice that this one is closer to the edge than this one. The closer hole goes to the inside, and you can actually test fit these, make sure it fits. Should fit perfectly on there. And now that we have those test fit, let's pick up where we left off and get these attached back to the rollers. Sometimes when you're doing these one-cut videos and you don't want to have to redo it, you find problems and you fix them, and then you keep moving forward. Make sure you get these good and tight the first time because you won't have access to them once it's all together. Same thing here. The shorter side goes to the inside. And now we use those screws that we pulled out earlier. We've got our M5 16mm. We'll go all the way through all 4 of these. I'm going to make sure before I actually put the nuts on here, I'm actually going to put all 8 of these in and make sure everything moves fairly smoothly. If all goes well, this should still move, and it does. This means those mounts are in good shape. So on the bottom of these screws, I'm going to use a lock washer and a nut to make sure that I don't have to worry about these backing out. If you don't have the lock washers, you actually can use the nylon nuts as well. But these are what I have, and they should work just as well. You may be wondering, why didn't I just replace this whole piece? Why am I using an adapter? The obvious answer is rigidity. By leaving the metal plate there, I am making sure that the entire system is still rigid. And this means that my adapter is only supporting it in the direction of motion, which there shouldn't be much flex. Then we'll make sure it moves freely, and it does. And next, let's move on to the y-axis. All right, so you see the key to this one. You'll see the key to this one was adding the holes here so that the plate has these 2 little notches here that will fit into there. All right, so let's get this mounted same way as last time. And then we want to do our best to center this bar between the 2 left and right plates. This doesn't have to be perfect because it won't go to the full extent, because this is a 300mm bar and it's only a 200 and 20mm bed. Let's try it. All right, and this should slide freely. All right, that's good. Let's get the plate mounted on this one. And it should just pop right into these holes here. Oh, wrong way. Pop into the holes here. Yep. 3 screws. Same thing on the back with the lock nut, or excuse me, lock washer and the nuts. I'm gonna do the top ones first because those holes are a little bit tighter. One thing I need to check on, does this put it far enough out? It might not, in which case I'll need a small redesign on that, but we'll get to that in a minute. Let's go ahead and finish putting back together the hot end. Okay. And there it goes. It's gotta happen one time, almost every video. Now if we want, we'll go ahead and add the idler wheel back. It's gonna need. All right, so we actually have a slight problem with running into when it moves back. It moves really well, but it does slide across the rails when we get past a certain point. It slides across the rails. And then it will wear down those belts. So, one more thought before we get too much further. Let's see if we're going to have the same problem on the Y axes as well. So let's get that put back together. There we go. So, from an assembly standpoint, we are all back together. Let's see if the Ys have the same problem. They look like they do. So it's good. We can't go off the rails there. We're not going off the rails there. But on all 3 axes, we scrape the rails because there's no guide. So I believe I need to add either a 3D printed guide, if I don't mind it rubbing, which I kind of do, or I'm going to have to put an extra idler on all 6 positions, 1 at each end. So, give me 1 second. I will print something, and I will be right back. So, as I just mentioned, I've run into a little situation. These belts are going to scrape the edge of these rails and try to cut everything up, and that is a bad situation. It's on all 3 axes. This means, of course, that I have to go and I'm going to have to order some idlers that will sit right here on both ends of each axis, and those idlers, of course, will take care of this curve. And I believe we even have enough belt to make that work without any problem, but I actually am a little impatient, so I designed these. And this was printed in PETG. It is simply a hump that's the right height that takes it to about this height. And what this should do is act as an idler of sorts. Now, this is obviously not a permanent solution. This would scrape that belt down over time. But what I did is, again, I designed this. It's got curves on it. And I printed it sideways. What that does is it makes it where all of the layer lines are running parallel to the way that the belt is going to be moving. And I also printed this out of PETG, which is a lot smoother than most PLA. If you've never printed with PETG, this is more like, it feels more like a water bottle, which is also made out of PET. So, not a permanent solution, but I think it'll get me through today. And so I'm going to, this is the prototype. Let's see how it does. All right, so let's attach this here. I'm gonna tighten it up. And so if this will work, this works pretty much like I said, exactly like an idler would. You take this, get the right bits, and tighten these up. I'm gonna pull it tight for now because I am running a test and I wanna see how it does. All right, so that should work as a possible solution. Like I said, I wouldn't want to keep it this way because I do worry, are we going to grind this belt down eventually? I don't think it would happen quickly due to the fact there's going to be a low coefficient of friction here. And like I said, these layer lines are running in the same direction. So let me go print up 6 of these that are going to go here in the back, and then do the same thing on the other ones. And that should get us up and running without the idlers. So to the other printer yet again. All right, day 2 of this build, and I have built more of these guys, which I showed you over here, and 6 of them, 2 for each axis. Keep in mind, I know this is a bad idea. I'm doing it as a stopgap just to test the kinematics of the printer. So let me get these installed on all of the rails. This will allow me to test it as is so that when I get the idlers that are going to be put in place for this, I'll actually know that they're going to work, and I'll have less testing to do at that point, trying to speed this process along. So first of all, I need to loosen back up this guy. And then I should be able to get this one back off and start putting all these on. Notice I've already gone and put on all of my screws here to make this quicker. And I'm going to actually just push these up against the rail. I think that's the best place to put them. The belt should go over those nicely. If you'll notice, the belt should be just about perfectly aligned with these so that it's parallel. And that looks really good. And that was just by simply doing a measurement from here up until the bottom of this, and then that gave me this height. And I'll use that same height when I do the mount for the idlers. We'll tighten that up in a minute once I get everything else put on. Go ahead and do this one. And if you notice, I also modeled these to where they're curved up. I will share this model. And I don't think it's one you should use, but I am curious to see how much wear and tear we actually do see on the belts by doing it this way. It may not be nearly as bad as I'm afraid it might be. But again, this also lets me know if the default belt links are going to fit with everything. And that was something I was worried about. Am I going to have to switch out the belts because of the change? I don't think so. I think it's actually going to fit just barely. Now, let's go and tighten up all of our belts. And how tight should it be? Well, I think if you can kind of strum it a little bit, it's probably tight enough. I think it's also pretty important that it's tight, the same level of tight on both sides. It's a very smooth movement. Check that out. Not having any problems guiding over those humps there. I actually like those. Probably more than I should. Now let's tighten up this last one. Now let's check this one out. And that moves really smooth. Happy with these rails. Obviously not expensive high-end rails. I only spent, I guess, about 20 bucks each on them. All right. Last thing we need to do is go ahead and replace our end stop here with the one I newly designed. And I need to remove this board from this adapter, and my adapter uses the exact same mounting because I like their end stops. And notice it has these grooves already designed in, and I did the same thing, and I just reprinted this while I was reprinting those other adapters because it wasn't long enough. This one should fit. Let's find out. The parts under the board should fit in the same holes as they did there. My tolerance on these holes should be just right, which they are. Again, this was not printed on the Ender 5. Obviously, it was out of commission. I printed this on my modified ANET A8. So I can verify that it should print on different kind of printers without any problems. There we go. M4 mounting hardware. I'll put that on. And I'm going to need one additional M4 mounting hardware because I've got 2 mounting holes in this one, which is different than the original. All right, line these up, put it roughly where the other one was, and that should hit. I may have to do some adjusting later to figure out exactly where this goes, but it can be moved one way or the other later. It's not a big deal. I'm going to sort of eye it, because I think it needs to be further over. Just trying to see where it looks right on the mount. All right, plug in and stop in place. All right, let's see if it moves. Power on. Got a little noise in that fan. One of my future upgrades is definitely going to be replacing those with something quieter. Now, let's do a home. There we go. The end stop on this axis still runs into my new mounting plate, so no change there on the end stop. And I'm way off on my homing because now I've got the width, the height of this rail, which is, I believe, somewhere around 13 millimeters or so, that I'm off on the height. So I am going to need to make changes so that I'm homing in a different place. So let's adjust the screw that's underneath. I think you guys saw this in my other video. So that's an M4 screw. So looking right here at the Z end stop, you'll notice that it's not even sticking up anymore. So I think we can just home directly against this plate and then adjust accordingly. So let's do a home operation now and see how that works. We may run into the plate, but we're not going to hit that hard. So strangely enough, something was wrong with my math here, and that is still not getting us close enough to the bed. Let's see where I can't see it on the camera. There it is. So that's still not getting close enough to the bed. So like I said, something was wrong with my math. Let me take a look at this and see what I'm going to have to do to fix it. I'll be right back. All right, another print, another solution. So what I've done is got a new end stop mount. And so this end stop lowers the mounting, or I guess raises the mounting, 5 millimeters, as you can see here. And I'm just gonna swap this onto here and get it mounted. All right, slight change of scenery so you can see a little bit better what I'm doing here. So this is replacing the Z end stop right here, and right here it really won't matter exactly where it's positioned, but I am going to try to position where the old one was in case I need to put a screw back in. Right now the screw is either not in or not doing anything because of how much I've needed to raise the bed. So if all goes well, this should work. All right, and we plug back in our wire, which is right here. And let's do a home operation and let's see if this is a good angle to look at that. I think we can see there that looks pretty good. Let's see how we are in terms of a paper distance away. So definitely need to go up a little bit, but we're close. So at this point I'm going to level the bed and do a calibration cube test print to actually see how close we are to having a working kinematic system that will actually give us good tight prints. Let's go do that.
Never thought
So here's the first test print off the printer. We're using the guides instead of the idlers. I think you can immediately see there are ridges that are being carried that are almost perfectly matching to the ridges in the belt. So definitely need the idlers over the ridges. Those aren't going to work. But I think more importantly, we were trying to test the accuracy and the kinematics, and that seems to be spot on. If you'll notice, the layers are looking beautiful in both X and Y direction. And if we take a look at the accuracy, this was tuned beforehand. And what are we looking at in the X direction? We're looking at about 11 hundredths off. In the Y direction, looking at it's about spot on, depending on how much you squeeze it and how much you move it around. It's spot on in the Y direction. And we haven't done anything to Z, but nonetheless, it is only a few hundredths off in the Z direction. So it's looking good. Now I'll just wait on those idlers and swap those out, and we'll then get to do some final test prints and see how it looks when we're rolling smooth on those axes. Well, that about does it for part 2 in this video series. If you're enjoying this series, please like this video. Please leave a comment if you have any questions. And be sure to subscribe if you haven't already to keep track of these videos and to be notified when I post the next one. Why don't you hit that little bell icon and you'll receive a notification on all of your devices. Again, thanks for joining me here on Kersey Fabrications. I'll see you next time.